Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. Since his childhood, Vladimir Putin grew up listening to the stories of war that his parents had experienced. His father, a brave Red Army soldier, faced death in the life-and-death struggle against the Nazis. His mother, a resilient woman in the besieged city of Leningrad, survived the days of hunger, cold, and immense loss. Their stories were not only family memories, but also profound lessons about patriotism, sacrifice, and indomitable will. In his small apartment in Leningrad after the war, young Putin listened to each story with all his young heart. It was those memories that engraved in his mind the belief that Russia could only survive when its people knew how to stand up, protect, and remember the past. Over the years, those memories became an inseparable part of the way he viewed World War II. Not just history, but a legacy of blood, tears, and national pride. 70 years after the victory over Nazi Germany, the Kremlin's most powerful man stands in the middle of Red Square, where the footsteps of those troops still echo. Vladimir Putin is preparing to preside over a grand military parade, not only to celebrate victory, but also to remember the war that shaped his view of Russia and its place in the modern world. Born in 1952, more than 7 years after the guns fell silent, Putin did not personally experience the brutal years of what Russians call the Great Patriotic War. But those memories are never far away from him. They live in the stories of his parents, in old photographs, and in the deep pride of every Russian. For Putin, commemorating victory is not just a ritual, but also a continuation of collective memory, where courage, sacrifice, and a fierce desire to defend the fatherland converge. Instead, the memories of the war that Vladimir Putin often talks about are not based on his own experiences, but are woven into simple stories at family dinners. His father, also named Vladimir, often recounted the harsh years he spent in the Red Army. He served in a unit of the NKVD, the precursor to the KGB, of which Putin later became a part. One day, his unit was ordered to advance on the town of Kingisepp, near the Estonian border, but they were ambushed by German troops after being betrayed by the locals. Of the 28 soldiers who went, only 4 returned alive, and Putin's father was one of them. After the battle, he was sent to nearby Leningrad, which was under siege. The city was under constant bombardment, and during one battle, he was seriously injured by a grenade explosion and hospitalized. Those stories, told in the dim light of dinner, were deeply imprinted on the young Putin's mind, nurturing in him admiration for his father's generation and the belief that Russia's strength was born from the endurance and resilience of its people. While his father was fighting at the front, his mother Maria faced another war, the battle for survival in the heart of the besieged city of Leningrad. For 900 days and nights, the city was cold, hungry, and the sound of artillery shells echoed constantly. Food was almost gone, and people had to share thin slices of bread, made from sawdust and the remnants of barley. Maria was so exhausted that one day, while trudging through the snow-covered streets and among the corpses, she fainted. The body collectors thought she was dead and put her in with the other victims. It was only when her husband, who had just returned from the trenches after being wounded, recognized her and pulled her out of the pile of corpses that she was saved. But fate was cruel, and their eldest son, Victor, succumbed to diphtheria during the days of medicine and food shortages. That story of famine, loss, and fragile life amidst the flames of war was deeply engraved in the memory of young Vladimir Putin, nurturing in him the belief that the strength of the Russian people is born from pain and resilience to overcome hardship. His parents' stories instilled in Putin a deep appreciation for the brutality of war and a belief that Russian history should not be judged by others. As an adult, he carried that memory with him to make sense of disputed history. He believed that the Soviet Union, in the dark years before the war, was forced to choose between two equally risky paths. In August 1939, Berlin and Moscow signed a non-aggression pact, a secret agreement dividing up spheres of influence in Europe, with Poland divided and the Baltic states placed under Soviet control. Decades later, the document was officially ratified by Mikhail Gorbachev in 1989. But in Putin's eyes, it was not a manifestation of hegemonic ambitions, but a desperate attempt to protect the country before war broke out. He argues that the West initiated the betrayal when Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement with Adolf Hitler in 1938, abandoning Czechoslovakia and leaving the Soviet Union to fend for itself. For Putin, those decisions were not just political strategy, but evidence of a period of Russian encirclement, where pride and obsession with survival went hand in hand with history. Putin has said that Soviet leaders felt betrayed and isolated after Munich. They realized that when the West chose to compromise with Hitler, the threat was not only hanging over Czechoslovakia, but was also creeping closer to the Soviet Union's eastern borders. In this context, Stalin decided to sign the pact with Germany, a move he believed would protect national security and interests, even though it would cost him skepticism and criticism from the world. Putin later recalled that people could criticize Stalin or the Soviet generals all they wanted, but at that time, no one could be sure that they would win if they rejected the pact. And then, history proved that the temporary agreement was just the calm before the storm. In 1941, Nazi Germany suddenly betrayed and launched the largest offensive in human history, pouring millions of soldiers and terrible firepower into Soviet territory. Cities were engulfed in flames, villages were flattened, and millions of people died. It was a moment when the entire nation had to rise up, not only to fight the enemy, but also to regain its own existence. In these stories, Putin not only heard the gunshots of the past, but also felt the spiritual strength that helped Russia overcome the darkness of war. According to Putin, no one can fully understand the price the Soviet Union paid in that fierce war. When he talks about World War II, his voice often drops, as if speaking for the millions of souls left on the frozen fields. He emphasizes that the scale of that sacrifice is beyond imagination. While Western countries like Britain lost about 350,000 people, and the United States about 500,000, his country had to bear the terrible toll of more than 25 million lives. Each of those numbers is not just a soldier, but also mothers, fathers, children who starved to death in besieged cities or died under bombs. They are villages wiped out, families broken, people who returned with both physical and mental wounds. For Putin, these are not just cold statistics of history, but memories flowing in the veins of the Russian people. Pain and pride combined into one. He believed that the world must bow to that sacrifice, because without the blood and tears of millions of Soviet people, humanity would probably never have regained peace. Stories about his parents, about war, about life and death, have nurtured in Vladimir Putin a deep belief that Russia was built on the blood, tears, and resilience of millions of people. Through each story and memory, he not only saw the past, but also saw the strength that helped his people stand up after the devastation. It is a memory that no one is allowed to forget. If you also feel that indomitable spirit, please like and subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the most authentic and moving historical stories with us. Amidst the bustle of a United Service Organization, USO, event circa 1943, A woman in a bikini gracefully walks among the ranks of smiling and amused American servicemen. Performances and entertainment like this were organized by the USO to ease the war fatigues, bringing joy and optimism to American soldiers serving in World War II. Amid the bustle of a French port, soldiers of the Auxiliary Military Pioneer Corps are busy unloading cargo from a ship that has just docked. Sweat and coal dust mingle with their sweat, but their eyes shine with pride as they contribute to the front line. Formed in 1939 and renamed a year later, the force undertakes light but vital engineering tasks. They are the silent warriors who keep the British war machine running. On 26 October 1936, amid loud cheers and fluttering flags, the motorcade carrying Italian colonial minister Alessandro Lassona and Goboli Gigli drove through the main street of Addis Ababa. A huge banner flew overhead proclaiming the Duce, the symbol of Mussolini's power. On both sides of the road, Italian soldiers saluted, while the locals looked on in silence. The photograph captured the moment when the Italian Empire believed it had completely subdued this proud African land. In 1937, in the suffocating atmosphere of Europe before the storm of war, Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini walked side by side, inspecting long lines of SS soldiers in cold black uniforms. Hundreds of shining bayonets reflected the gloomy light of a dark age. The two dictators walked with confidence and arrogance, believing that their power was invincible. This moment recorded the historical moment when the specter of World War was gradually rising. On October 19, 1935, in the middle of the arid Ogaden region, Abyssinian soldiers risked their lives by jumping into a ditch to avoid the bombs and bullets from Italian planes flying overhead. Dust flew everywhere. The roar of the engines drowned out the commanders' shouts. They only had old rifles and courage to fight against the destructive mechanical power. The photo captured the moment of life and death, where courage and despair mingled with the smoke of war. In the middle of a vast field, a Russian officer bowed respectfully to Prince Cannon in a solemn scene. Beside him stood his loyal warhorse, motionless, like a silent witness to history. On the prince's face shone the calm and majesty of a man who had experienced two great wars. He was not only a general, but also a symbol of honor and loyalty, an image that made that moment immortal in the flow of history. In order to demoralize the Chinese defenders, Japanese military officials reportedly ordered the execution of all captured prisoners. The war in the Orient was now a merciless war. Here are some of the Chinese prisoners patiently awaiting death at the execution ground, where they would be captured by the Japanese. During the fierce days of World War II, the Pacific coast became a witness to one of the fiercest battles. The photo captured the scene after New Zealand forces retook the position from the Japanese. Under the cliffs and rising waters, the traces of the battle were still deeply imprinted, a testament to the brutality of the conflict. In that scene, the sea was eerily calm, as if swallowing the last echoes of an uncompromising confrontation. On the banks of the cold Qinhuai River in 1937, a scene of mourning stretched to the horizon. Wooden boats lay motionless in the mud, surrounded by countless motionless bodies, painful evidence of the Nanjing tragedy. A Japanese soldier stood silently watching, in a space heavy enough to suffocate. The river water flowed slowly, carrying the echoes of the wronged souls. That photo, more than any narrative, was the most tragic denunciation of the darkness of war. As Germany conquered new territory in Eastern Europe, it created special paramilitary units called Einsatzgruppen, which murdered Jews and dissidents, often in mass shootings. Jews and other victims in Germany and the countries under its control were rounded up and sent to concentration camps, labor camps, and death camps. The massacre was carried out without exception for children or infants. At Auschwitz, the Germans also conducted medical experiments on living human beings, such as placing prisoners in pressure chambers, testing them on various drugs, freezing them to death, and performing other extreme torture on prisoners. The genocide of 6 million German Jews is known as the Holocaust, or Shoah. Pictured are Hungarian Jews being held in a gas chamber at the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1944. On January 9, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, causing Britain and France to declare war on Germany. Most opinions believe that this was the moment World War II officially began. On September 17th, the Soviet Union entered Poland. By June 10th, Poland was completely occupied by Germany, the Soviet Union, and their allies. In 1940, Germany took control of Denmark and attacked France, forcing it to surrender and allowing Germany to seize much of its territory. Pictured here is a German Bf-110 fighter jet flying over the border of Poland during World War II. In December 1944, the skies over Austria shook under the roar of American B-24 Liberators. Under their wings, the railway network, the transport lifeline of Nazi Germany, was engulfed in smoke. Bomb after bomb fell, cutting off supply lines and paralyzing the enemy's logistics system. From thousands of meters above, American pilots saw flames rising from train stations, factories, and warehouses, a symbol of the devastating turn of the war in the skies over Europe. In the middle of the Dutch battlefield, American soldiers hide in trenches, clutching machine guns aimed at the Germans. This black and white photograph captures the silence before the storm, when every breath, every look is as tense as a bowstring. In the distance is an empty field, but behind it lies the line between life and death of the Allied offensive. In the pale sunlight, they fight not only for victory, but also for the hope of ending a nightmare that has lasted too long. This disturbing photograph captures the moment after World War II, when a French woman had her head shaved in public as punishment for allegedly collaborating or having relations with occupying German soldiers. Her face is blank, her eyes blank with shame and hatred, while those around her look on indifferently. The images reveal a dark chapter where honor and revenge collided with post-war rage. Around September 18, 1944, in the newly liberated Belgian town of Aalst, a soldier of the Irish Guard smiled as he accepted a cigar from a local resident. In the jubilant atmosphere after long days of occupation, the small gift became a symbol of gratitude and joy of reunion. This simple yet emotional image depicts the warm military-civilian relationship amid the flames of World War II. December 1944, the suburbs of Holland shook after a flying bomb attack. In the chaos, American soldiers knelt by the railway tracks, trying to treat civilians amid the dust and groans. Each blanket was hastily wrapped, each wound was bandaged with all the compassion in the midst of war. This photo not only tells the story of the cruelty of bombs and bullets, but also depicts the glimmer of humanity in the darkness of a bloody era. Around 1942, amid the white clouds, a squadron of B-17G Flying Fortresses of the United States Air Force quietly entered German airspace. The giant machines glided in tight formation, the sun reflecting off their cold metal shells. Inside, the pilots were highly concentrated, aiming for Emden, the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. Each flight was a gamble between life and death, but also a symbol of the courage and unyielding determination of an entire generation. This moment was like a living symbol of the team spirit and bravery of World War II. The soldiers on the ground lined up neatly beside their bicycles, raising their hands in farewell as the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress roared into the sky. They knew that each flight carried with it hope and immeasurable danger. The sound of the engines and the cheers became a farewell song, marking a time when courage was the only thing stronger than fear. Amidst the rubble and cracked walls, a birthday party was held with loud laughter. It was the birthday of Christine Pierce, a little girl in Hammersmith, London, on July 17, 1944. Her house had been destroyed by a V-1 bomb just 3 weeks earlier. But her family and neighbors gathered around a simple wooden table. In the devastated scene, they raised their glasses, shared smiles and hopes, a testament to the indomitable spirit of Londoners during the war. On April 12, 1945, in the Merkers salt mine in Germany, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, and General Omar N. Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, carefully examined a suitcase filled with precious silver. This was part of the huge booty hidden by the Nazis. That moment clearly reflected the brutality of war and the secrets that the Allies gradually discovered. The photograph captures a horrific moment in history. Under the shadow of the Nazi helmets and expressionless faces, a group of women are dragged into the middle of the street, bewildered, naked, and without any choice. The silent sound of helpless hands, the fateful gaze forward, all serve as a warning that humanity can lose its dignity and freedom in a single moment. This historic photograph captures a haunting moment during the war in China. Amidst the devastation, innocent civilians face severe punishment at the hands of the occupying forces. Behind the lens is the pain of a nation, a reminder of the terrible consequences of war and violence. The photo not only records the past, but also reminds humanity of the value of peace and humanity. U.S. Marines carry a near-dead baby, pulled from under a rock in a cave on Saipan in the summer of 1944. The baby was the only survivor among hundreds of corpses in the cave. Saipan, part of the Mariana Islands, had been a Japanese colony since World War I. By the end of 1943, it was home to more than 29,000 Japanese. In June-July 1944, the U.S. landed on Saipan, defeated the Japanese army, and controlled the island until now. 3 young women, Janice Cooper, Marilyn Connor, and Gloria Ellickson, attracted all eyes while sunbathing at Steeplechase Park on Coney Island, New York, in the 1940s. What was special was that they wore unique swimsuits made from World War II Air Force escape maps, a meaningful gift from their pilot boyfriends. The image was both sexy, daring, and full of wartime imprints of a turbulent period. Amidst the sound of drills and metal collisions, these women were not only assembling planes, they were building hope for the world. When men went to war, they became silent warriors in factories. Their soft hands now held tools tightly, their steadfast eyes turned to the bomb-filled sky. War had robbed them of their youth, but it had also turned them into indomitable symbols of strength and courage. Nurses, air raid prevention workers, and rescue workers tend to injured hospital patients, waiting on stretchers to be taken to nearby hospitals after an air raid by a Nazi German Vergeltungswaffe Fiesler Fi-103 V-1 Doodlebug bomber that hit Lewisham Hospital on the 26th of July, 1944, in London, England. In March 1945, in the midst of the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, a Boeing B-29 heavy bomber was forced to make an emergency landing on a runway filled with smoke and flames. Immediately after touching down, the giant plane burst into flames, turning into a fireball in the middle of the battlefield. The image was both tragic and heroic, reflecting the extreme harshness of war and the sacrifices that air crews had to face in each mission. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. For much of the war, the Germans had absolute air dominance. The mighty and fearsome Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, was the largest and most powerful air force in World War II. They had devastated London during the Battle of Britain. Here, however, the British got at least a small measure of revenge, bombing German-held Abbeville airfield in France. May 1945. Members of the Danish resistance movement escort two women arrested for their relations with the Nazis during the war. The brutal scene at Iwo Jima. March 1945. 4 U.S. Marines huddle down a charred hillside as a Japanese bunker explodes, billowing smoke engulfing the sky. The ground is bare. The trees are burned to the bone, depicting the naked brutality of war. The photo was praised by Life as one of the most horrifying and realistic images, capturing the moment when a small human being faced with the enormous destruction of the Iwo Jima battlefield. The Second Sino-Japanese War, July 7, 1937, September 9, 1945, was a military conflict fought primarily between the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the war merged with the larger conflict of World War II as a major front in what is widely known as the Pacific War. Although the two countries had fought intermittently since 1931, full-scale war began in earnest in 1937 and only ended with Japan's surrender in 1945. The war was the result of Japan's decades-long imperialist policy of dominating China politically and militarily, and protecting its vast reserves of raw materials and other economic resources, especially food and labor. Prior to 1937, China and Japan had fought small, localized skirmishes. However, for various reasons, both sides refrained from launching a full-scale war. In 1931, the Japanese Kwantung Army invaded Manchuria following the Mukden Incident. The last of these was the Marco Polo Bridge Incident in 1937, which marked the beginning of a full-scale war between the two countries. Amid the tense battlefield scene in Normandy in June 1944, a group of British soldiers still found a rare moment of simple joy. Sergeant Andrew Alexander Dalzell and Corporal Day stood in front of a makeshift betting board where 3 10th Corps soldiers were excitedly betting on the Derby horse race. Their laughter echoed through the distant sound of bombs and bullets. More than just a pastime, it was a way for them to keep their spirits up amid the storm. A year later, Dalzell was awarded the Order of the British Empire for extraordinary bravery. In this haunting photograph, the crew of a B-17E Flying Fortress named Jerry Jinx stride off the runway at RAF, Molesworth, England, in 1942. They are the youthful faces of 427 Bomber Squadron, filled with courage and a fierce belief in their mission. But just over a month later, in January 1943, the plane was shot down by the Luftwaffe over France. All but Bernard Jurasek, the sole survivor of the doomed crew, died in the fierce battle. In December 1937, in the devastated streets of Nanjing, a Chinese soldier was captured and surrounded by Japanese soldiers. His eyes were calm, but filled with silent despair, while rough hands gripped his shoulders, escorting him toward his fate. On his sleeve, a white dusty bandage was a testament to his defeat. The scene, seemingly normal in the midst of war, carried the suffocating weight of a life about to be swallowed by history. In December 1937, when Nanjing fell to the Japanese army, a series of horrific tragedies took place. In the photo, the Chinese prisoner kneels in the middle of an open field, his eyes strangely calm as he faces his fate. Behind him, the Japanese soldiers stand still, while the sword-wielding man maintains a cold posture, ready to strike. The scene not only depicts war, but also exposes the fragile boundary between humans and their own darkness. In May 1941, on the rocky roads of Crete, German paratroopers marched silently through a scene of devastation. The bodies of British soldiers lay scattered on both sides, a testament to the fierce battle that had just taken place. The harsh sunlight shone on the tired but determined figures, a tragic moment that revealed the cruelty of war and the resilience of those who never gave up. In May 1945, during the brutal Battle of Okinawa, U.S. Marines advanced through a devastated village, reduced to rubble and devastation by bombs and shells. Amid the devastation, the lifeless body of a Japanese soldier lay on the ground, a tragic symbol of sacrifice and despair. The image reflected not only the brutality of the battle, but also the brutal price borne by both sides in World War II. World War II. Men, women, and children rummage through the rubble of German bombing raids in London. July 28, 1941. German air raids killed more than 40,000 British civilians during World War II, with Londoners accounting for nearly half the total. German attacks on British cities, using conventional aircraft as well as V-1 and V-2 rockets, continued until March 1945. By then, the war's outcome was long decided, and Allied troops were massing on Berlin. In 1943, the Allies began a bombing campaign against rail and oil targets in Bucharest, part of a broader bombing policy aimed at crippling Germany's transportation system. Bucharest was considered the #1 oil target in Europe. Picture taken on August 1, 1943. When the war broke out, the I-16 was the Soviet Union's main fighter. It was the first high-speed monoplane with retractable landing gear. Firefighters use a water hose to extinguish flames and damage on the flight deck of HMS Formidable, an illustrious-class aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy, following a kamikaze air attack by an Imperial Japanese Navy Mitsubishi A6M0 during the Battle of Okinawa on the 4th of May, 1945, off the Sakishima Islands, Okinawa, Japan. In the mist-shrouded Sutjeska Valley, exhausted Yugoslav partisans bravely retreat through the treacherous terrain. They carry their wounded, their weapons, and their fragile hope amid the hell of war. The photo seems to freeze a life-and-death moment where courage and despair blend, a testament to the indomitable power of humanity in the face of brutality and destruction. In the skies above Athens in 1941, German Luftwaffe Dornier Do-17Zs soar over the immortal symbol of Greece, the Acropolis. In that moment, both majestic and somber, history and war collide. Ancient beauty meets the storm of modern steel. This photograph captures more than just a flight, but a breathtaking moment when human civilization stands before the darkness of war. In the early 1940s at Fort Bragg, amid the build-up to war, young soldiers found joy in everyday moments. They laughed, shared stories, and temporarily forgot the darkness that was spreading across the world. Warm lights and laughter echoed in the small room, all as a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, people still maintained hope and love for life. Around 1940, in the gloomy forests of Yugoslavia, a Gestapo agent coldly observed a tragic scene. The resistance fighters were tied up, standing between life and death. The atmosphere was heavy. The wind whistled through the trees like a lament for innocent lives. The photo became a haunting reminder, reminding humanity never to forget the price of freedom and courage in wartime. In April 1942, after the daring Doolittle raid, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle appeared with his crew alongside Chinese officials in a significant historical moment. The photo taken in China shows Zhao Fuqi, party secretary of the West Zhejiang provincial government, standing on the right. This is a testament to the close cooperation between the Allies and the Chinese resistance forces in the war against Japan. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was engulfed in a blinding flash of lightning. The opening moment of hell on Earth. The first atomic bomb in human history exploded, flattening the entire city in an instant. More than 140,000 lives were lost. Houses and streets were reduced to ashes. In that desolate scene, a man stood silently among the rubble, looking back at his former homeland. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate, and the World War entered its bloody end. Although the war is long gone, its echoes still reverberate in every photo, every story, every scar of humanity. Each like, each subscription of yours is not only a show of support, but also a reminder that we will preserve that memory, so that the painful past will never be repeated.